This is lesson 2 for Cantonese style Mahjong. I want to show you the player reference that I created to help my students with the game during one of my lessons. I'm going to have a link below this video so you can download it for yourself until you get used to scoring. This is a pretty easy style to learn, and the scoring is very simple, so you'll have it memorized in no time at all. But you can use this reference if you'd like until you've got it memorized. I want to show it to you in real life. This is how small it is. It's pretty compact. That was the front. This is the back. And I'm going to show you in detail on the screen a PDF version that you can download. And then this is the inside with the scoring. So let's take a look at the PDF here. On the front, it is going to be a cover. And then there's just a little decoration at the bottom. There's no purpose there. On the back side of the card, I have basic gameplay. This is high level. It is not comprehensive. If you want comprehensive rules, you can just find them online. There are all kinds of instructions on how to play Mahjong. And if you don't already know, there are actually 40 ways to play this game, maybe more now. But this is just one of them. So there are a lot of ways to play. This is just one of them. So on here I have the setup, basically where you're going to sit when you play, how you build the wall, which is going to be kind of like the draw pile. If you think about a deck of cards, you have a deck of cards in the middle of the table. Instead of a deck of cards, we have a wall of tiles. So that's how you build that. And then how to deal the tiles to each of the players, because you're going to need 13 tiles in your hand at all times. And then the 14th tile will make your winning hand. Then I go into very high level of how to play, where the dealer discards first, and then the next player picks one or claims the discard. And we'll talk more about that at another lesson. So also, finally, I go into the wind of the round, and we'll talk about that more later as well. So I want to talk about the scoring, which is on the inside of the card. On the left, there are special hands, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Underneath that is the number of fawn, which is a point base, and then what the payout is, which is your actual score, final score. Underneath that, I have images of the character suit or cracks. That is the hardest suit to memorize, so there's a legend here that you can refer to until you have it memorized. On the right is really the primary portion of scoring that you're going to use in most hands. We have the scoring divided by category, and then under that is a recommended bankroll if you're going to be using sticks that help you pay out. And then under that is a legend of the honor suit. Some people have a hard time remembering the east, south, west, and north, so you can refer to this while you're trying to get that memorized. Let's go ahead and drill into the actual scoring. So the point base is called a fawn. For flowers and seasons, if you have no flowers at all when you win, you get a fawn. If you have your own flower or season, you get a fawn. When you play this game, you're seated at a table. If the dealer has a one flower, they'll get a fawn because that is their flower. The player to their right is number 2, and then going counterclockwise, the player across from them is number 3, and then on their left, going counterclockwise, is 4. So each player is seated at 1, 2, 3, or 4. If any player draws their own flower, they'll get a fawn for that. If you have all 4 flowers of one color, either blue or red are what the colors are mostly in sets, then you'll get 2 fawn for that, because one of the tiles in there will be yours, and then because you had all 4, you get an extra fawn for that. Next we have winds and dragons. Winds and dragons typically are going to add more value to your hand than the numbered tiles. Any pung of dragons is a fawn. So that pung of dragons all by itself is a fawn. If you get your seat wind or the wind of the round, or also called prevailing wind, you will get a fawn for that as well. When I told you a moment ago that the dealer sits at seat 1, the player on the right is seat 2, the player across is seat 3, and the player to the left is seat 4. Those are also known as directional seats or seat wind. The dealer is called east, followed by going counterclockwise to the right, south, then west, and then north. And you can remember that by saying a silly thing. I know it's silly, but it works. Eat soup with nuts. Eat soup with nuts. East, south, west, north. And that order is right here on the player reference. East, south, west, north. Eat soup with nuts. So if you're playing and you are east and you get a pung or 3 of a kind of the east wind, you'll get a fawn for that because that is your seat wind. So during the game, if that east player wins, they keep the dice. If they lose, the dice go to the next player, and so on. When the dice get back to the original east for the night, then you go to another round. So each player will get to be east for each round. The rounds are east, south, west, and north. Prevailing wind is that wind of the round. So the first wind of the round is east. If I'm the dealer and I have a pung of east winds and it is the wind of the round, I'll get 2 fawn for that because you get your own wind and prevailing wind. We'll talk more about that when we get to scoring. The next category is your whole hand, all 14 tiles. If it's made up of all chows, you get 1 fawn for that. That's the lowest scoring hand that you can get. If your hand is made up of 4 sets of 3 of a kind called pungs, you get 3 fawn for that. And that could be mixed suits. It doesn't have to be all one suit. It could be dots, bams, and cracks, or any combination of that. And winds and dragons, for that matter. If you have 1 suit with winds and dragons, also called honors, that's also known as a half flush or half family. That is 3 fawn too. If you have 1 suit only, that's 6 fawn. So your whole hand can be made up of any kind of combination of the 3 different suits and winds and dragons, and depending on what types of sets you use will determine the fawn for that hand. For winning, you will get a fawn for how you win. If you win by picking up a replacement tile from a flower, if you remember in the first lesson I told you about flowers, that they're not actually played in your hand. If you pick a flower, you expose it and get a replacement. If you win on that replacement, you'll get a fawn for that. If you win when you pick the very last tile on the wall, you'll get a fawn for that. If you win on the last discard, there's a fawn for that. There's also something called robbing a Kong. A Kong is 4 of a kind. So when somebody declares a Kong, if that Kong is one of the tiles that you need, you can declare Mahjong right then and there if you're ready for it. That's called robbing a Kong. That's worth the fun. And then if your whole hand is concealed and you pick your winning tile, you get a fawn for that. That's called all concealed. Those are the fawn for standard scoring. And as I was saying in the first lesson, this is a pick and discard game. You pick one and then you discard one. You pick one and you discard one. If you win by self-draw or self-pick, the other players at the table will pay you double the value of your hand. And the value would be this payout. So if you have a 4-fawn hand, you're going to get 2,000. If you self-pick, you'll get 4,000 from each player. If you win by discard, the discarder will pay you double, and the other 2 players will pay you the single value. So let's say the player to my right throws my winning tile. They're going to pay me 4,000, and the other 2 players will pay me 2,000. That's standard scoring and penalties. On the left is special hands, and I want to cover those in another lesson. As far as I'll show you examples of those hands, but I just want to briefly talk about them. They are special in that there's special meaning to them, but they still follow, with 2 exceptions, the same convention of 4 sets and a pair. They're just a little harder to make because, well, let's just go ahead and read them and I'll explain. The 2 exceptions to the 4 sets and a pair are 7 unique pair. You can have 7 unique pair and win, and that goes against the 4 sets and a pair convention. The pairs have to be unique though. You cannot have a Kong in there. The other exception is 13 orphans. I have it right here. It's 1 of each honor, 1 of each 1 and 9 in each of the suits, and any tile paired. That's 13 orphans. And you can see that's 10 fawn. It's very difficult to get, but it is possible. And the rest of these are all 4 sets in a pair. They're just made up of different suits and honor tiles that have high value in the final hand. And in a future lesson, I'll show you the hands using the tiles. So if you're interested in this player reference, there'll be a link below so that you can download it. The next lesson is going to be building a hand, and I'm going to show you how all this comes together using tiles.